ExxonMobil is the #1 oil driller there. There's been a number of changes in rights to the drilling rights offshore, but it's pretty convoluted, but it's essentially fallen into ExxonMobil's control.
Majority.
Yeah. And part of their agreements with the Guyanese government, but also the companies that they bought rights from, was that they would reinvest back into the Guyanese economy. And in 2022 alone, they dumped $400 million into the Guyanese local economy. And maybe in a major country or major city, that doesn't seem like a lot of money, but the town of Georgetown and the country of Guyana literally cannot absorb it. And the reason why is because there isn't the proper companies to take in those funds to actually develop things. So whether it's real estate or importing cars or selling food or building restaurants or whatever it is, they're just not prepared.
Yeah.
So for an entrepreneur that wants to move down there and check things out, I know we'll get to that in a little bit, it's just one of those things you're like, whoa, it's almost too many things that you could attack.
Totally.
And there's these major corporations literally handing out blank checks saying, fix this for us. We need this figured out for our oil employees to live. We need restaurants, we need hotels, we need transportation, we need nightlife, we need a restaurant, we need a bar. And they're ready to pay for it right now. But the only limiting factor is people down there building that stuff. And that's kind of what you're alluding to, is those growing pains. You can just tell it's right on the verge of taking that quantum leap to a kind of backwoods old style city to maybe a tier 1 city someday.
Yeah. Tier 1, or at least the shift from where the juxtaposition between falling down houses and then these brand new, right? And the way that works, it's like it's not linear. It's like, it's never been in my experience going to different places, traveling all over. It's not linear. It's like some things get built that are they're like tier 1 modern, and like a mall gets built, right? You go to places in the Middle East and these oil places, and it's like the most spectacular, ridiculous mall you've ever seen, next to like places that are old, that are falling down. That's kind of the way that things develop. But yeah, so back to kind of like what you're seeing, right? So we show up there, check in, we spend the next day walking around. It's like I said, it's a little bit sketch during the day.
It was sketch levels. I agree with that. I'm pretty well traveled.
Yeah.
I feel like I have very good street smarts.
Yeah.
And my street smarts meter was like, it was like getting pinged every couple minutes. You can see those eyes looking at you. You can see people kind of following you. And
Yeah.
kind of like, all right, I'm going to walk down this street. I'm going to make sure I stay in a group here. I'm going to walk into the store right now because these guys over here have totally checked me out, and they know for a fact that I'm some tourist that doesn't belong here.
I always ask the people at the hotel, I'm like, okay, you're local here. Like, what if you were in my position, what would you do and what wouldn't you do? And I remember the woman told me, she was like, don't walk that way. She's just like, that whole direction, just don't walk that way. You can walk that way. I was like, okay, great. I'll just trust you on that. So sketch level's kind of high. Then we go into, throughout the day, we kind of check things out. We're spending time in the city. Then we go have some really interesting meetings that night with entrepreneurs in the town, people that are involved in the government, people involved with the American government who are down there as kind of diplomats. And they talk about what is going on in Guyana? What are some of the opportunities that we're seeing? And that's kind of when it started to shift in my mind around, okay, oil's not the big opportunity. It's supporting other things. I think my biggest takeaway from that first night was there's going to be a massive boom in construction to support the expats that are going to be coming down to Guyana. And that was one of the first opportunities that I kind of was clicking in my mind. I'm like, where there's not many people, again, 800,000 people in this entire country. Who's going to be doing the building, right? And that was kind of like the question in my mind as all these big projects that they wanted to get done were being laid out, and they were talking about what the future of Guyana looks like. My first question was who's doing the building?
Yep. And I think one really good example of that is we spoke with a specific company that's an import-export company.
Yeah.
And their #1 problem right now was, capital for themselves to basically float the import and export expenses, but also there was a big storage yard. They needed a warehouse to basically import the stuff, keep it in the warehouse where it then got, distributed throughout the rest of Guyana.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about, let's say construction, maybe they're importing a container load of toilets or sinks or shower heads or whatever it is.
Yeah.
in the U.S. and many other countries, it's a non-thought. You don't even think about that. You just go to Home Depot or wherever you buy this stuff. But there you think, oh, I need to buy a house. And you're like, okay, let's go get the supplies. I'm like, well, where do I go?
Where do you go?
Oh, I got to import it all. And so that's a perfect business opportunity that is, I wouldn't have normally thought about, but it's import-export. We need a nice warehouse to import the stuff off the ship, get the container here, unload the stuff in the warehouse, and then we'll distribute it throughout the city for the next couple of weeks. And that one business alone was very simple, but also I would never have thought about it because I was so focused on the oil when we were going down there.